What's good in Soccer We Trust YouTube fam? How are we doing on this fine Monday? We're doing great. Thank you for asking, especially because we're hanging out with all of you. So hit like and subscribe, and let's get after it. Yes. What is up, everybody? And welcome to new U.S. Soccer CEO JT Batson's favorite podcast in Soccer We Trust. I got to meet him at the United Soccer Coaches Convention this past week in Philadelphia, and he said he would come on the show. So this is me laying some bait to make sure that happens, because you know you want to, JT. Anyway, I'm Jimmy Trashcan Cream Cheese Conrad Dino alongside Hollywood Heath Pearce and Charlie Chuck Wagon Davies. And we're going to talk about whether there should be some accountability at U.S. Soccer for this Reyna Berhalter fiasco, what we know about the upcoming January camp. The roster still hasn't yet to be announced. We're going to talk about the Seattle Sounders playing in the upcoming Club World Cup. They still have to beat either Al Ahly or Auckland to have a chance to play against Real Madrid in the semifinals. And, of course, we're going to dive into how Americans did abroad this weekend. But first, I missed you both in Philadelphia. I saw Jada Merritt. I saw Nick Raimondo. I saw all of these, Paul Caligiuri, former guest on the show. But I did not see Hollywood Heath Pearce or Charlie Chuck Wagon Davies. Heath, where were you? Why weren't you there?
I was home. Just,
just get home. It's fine.
Instead of being there, I was home. And some people, instead of being home, were there, and that's just sort of how it broke down for that. No, I had originally planned to go, but just timing didn't work out. But it was good to see all the familiar faces, and then in the day, and then all the same familiar faces at night, enjoying catching up with each other after a lot of people hadn't been to this again since the start of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to be there because you're just surrounded by so many like-minded people that want to grow the game, that want to learn more, and all that good stuff. Fun fact, the next coaching convention, so Heath, you can't miss it, is in Anaheim next January. So looking forward to that. Wow. Charlie, where were you? Charlie, where were you?
A couple of things. One, family. It's family time.
Yeah, okay.
Two, there's a historic moment in Boston where
that's right.
The Martin Luther King embrace.
Can't miss that.
Him and Coretta Scott King. So I had to be there, and it was emotional. So I'm happy I got to witness that and be a part of the conversation leading up to the memorial unveiling. So that is my excuse. But I want to know more about these conversations you had in Philadelphia. What were they?
Well, there were some good ones.
Mostly centered around.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I want to give a shout out to everyone that came up and said hi and that they listened to the podcast. I tried to potentially lead some of them into like, well, who do you like better? Me, Heath, or Charlie? They all pleaded the fifth ultimately and said they like us equally.
I like that.
Yeah, okay, sure. I wanted to hear, but I was the only one there, so there can probably be some bias, but they played it straight. So shout out to everybody that I said hi to. Thank you so much for the support.
Every former coach we ever had, Jimmy, I've asked that, and they've all said the same thing about the three of us, which is crazy. Just I loved you all the same. I had no favorites.
Yeah, that's sure.
Crazy.
I don't believe you, but I appreciate you saying that. So there was some conversations being had, and I'm glad you brought this up, Chuck. And there was an interesting interview where JT Batson, the new CEO, and Cindy Cohn, who's the president of U.S. Soccer, both sat down and did a little Q&A. And it was interesting to hear some of their thoughts and how revealing they were. And actually, there was some good questions from Soccer America's Mike Watala. And he asked, when Brian McBride was hired, Ernie Stewart said Brian would take the lead on hiring and firing coaches. Is that still the situation? And JT said, as part of our review, we're looking at how we're organized broadly. So we want to make sure, as I was trying to mention earlier, that this isn't just about who is the men's national team coach. It's how we're organized, what we're doing. Soccer America followed up. So has it changed? JT says, well, we haven't formally. Soccer America says it was reported when he was hired that Brian McBride's contract would run through the World Cup in Qatar. JT says he's still currently employed. Soccer America says, do we know when his contract is up? JT says we haven't made any long-term decisions. And finally, Soccer America says, so as far as who's responsible for leading on the hiring of the coach, it's not Brian. You're reviewing everything? And JT said yes. And also for good governance, any contract of that scale ultimately has to be approved by the board.
That's multiple millions of dollars.
It is. I think what's interesting here, though, is that he doesn't answer the question directly.
He doesn't answer any of them.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't, which means he's doing great as CEO of already. He's already learning how to tap dance very correctly.
As long as he had his fingers like this, just like slowly, like, kind of like, very political, like of like, just give a few word answer. Yeah, Charlie's got the holding the penny on your thumb and your pointer finger.
So I guess I want to talk about the accountability. Do you think somebody should be held accountable for this fiasco between Reyna and Berhalter? Because that's not coming out of nowhere. I think that if those guys, especially because they got calls from Claudio, because Claudio's already mentioned that he confided in Ernie Stewart and Brian McBride about this situation. I heard
which makes sense, because I would expect that. I would expect that, but I would also expect it to end there, to say, thank you for calling, because we respect you. We're former teammates. I understand your son is super talented and promising and you want him to play, but we are not the coaches. We don't make those decisions. We hire coaches, we fire coaches. We maybe have a strategy, overall strategy, but when it comes to managing the team, the coach has it, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it's done. Sorry, nothing's happening. That's the way the coach sees it, and it's over. And no, there's no pointing fingers. No one's to blame. Claudio can voice his opinion. He can confide in his friends. Great, but that's on a friend to friend kind of relationship. That's it, right? So no one's to blame for what's going down except for Claudio Reyna and his wife Danielle and Greg Berhalter, because he's the one who talked about Gio and him being the person who was causing kind of unrest within the squad.
What I would say, Jimmy, is and I spend 90% of my day in a business environment, as you could tell by my outfit. And I will say that there are times that you blur the lines get blurred between a private conversation and a conversation that's like, hey, if you keep going down this route, like I have to take, and I'm not talking about sharing like frustrations with the son not playing. That's like, okay, I get it. You know, like as a parent, I get it. As a former player, I get it. You as a parent, I understand that, right? But when we got into the wider scheme of what's being shared and who did what with what information, you start to get into this gray area where it's like almost like the, you know, world of like I don't want to go down that road. Actually, I won't use those examples. But like you're going into this, you're going down this sort of rabbit hole of like, the more you say, the more you're pushing me into a period of a person with my job where you're entering into something that's a little bit either inappropriate. I don't know what was said or what that conversation was, but you're entering into a world where you're like, now you're putting my job at risk by sharing information with me or saying things that is now partially my role to either share or pass on this information, right? And I'm not saying, I wasn't there for the conversation, so I don't know what it was what exactly was said, but it is the responsibility of anybody receiving that information to stop at a certain point and say, hey, we are friends. I appreciate this information, but some of this stuff, like you either have to be willing to understand that I've got to share this information or I've got to pass this on, because you're now putting me in a really tough spot as a friend and as a peer.
So I guess there's two prongs to this. One, to your point, Heath, and Charlie, I'll come back to you on this. And I definitely want to hear from everybody that's listening, whether you're listening on your favorite podcast platform of choice or here on YouTube. Hit us up at ISWT Pod on Twitter. Give us your 280 character thoughts on this. You can tag it a little bit more if you have more to say. Definitely curious about that. Leave it in the comments right now. We can maybe get to some live ones. But there's two prongs to this. One is, if Brian and Ernie Stewart got this information, do you feel like that they need to report it to the people that are above them, that, hey, there's something brewing here, I think you should be aware of it? Or because, to Heath's point, they're friends, that it just stays with them? And also, hey, Greg's the coach, we're not the coach, it's just going to stop here. I don't need to feel compelled to do that. That's one. The second thing is, do you feel like U.S. Soccer's feeling some pressure to name a fall guy in this situation? Because I wonder if something is going to happen, or if heads are going to roll, or because Brian McBride's contract is up, because he, as Mike Wojtala said correctly, when Brian was hired, his main job was to hire and fire coaches.
But it said it was reported that his contract was through, and then the response was that he's still currently employed. So like, I don't know if his contract is actually up. Is that confirmed?
I don't know either. I'm just going off of what proper journalists are doing and us commenting on what proper journalists are doing. But there's two prongs there. And I wonder if U.S. Soccer feels like there should be a head that needs to roll, because this is just unacceptable that this happens. And it feels like it comes out of nowhere when there was clearly people that knew. And there was some speculation that maybe Ernie had done that and Brian hadn't, and that was going to give them cause to let him go. That's this the kind of the what was being gossiped about, I would say, at the coaches convention. I can't confirm any of that, but I just want to say that I'm just curious because there are two different things here. And let's get into what we do know is that those guys did know.
Mm-hmm.
And do you feel like they should report above them, Charlie, when they get this type of information?
I think you have to. Just legally, if you're in a position where I think Ernie Stewart and Brian McBride are working for the federation, legally, I think they have to report something like that. You can't just say, oh, we're friends, I'm going to take off my U.S. soccer hat. It doesn't work like that. So I think you have to report it, one. And two, the questions that follow are, why now? If you knew this all this time, why would you be reporting it now? I think that comes back to, oh, you're throwing anything you can to make Greg suffer for not playing your son, right? And that's unfortunate that that's what it came down to, because obviously this was a known thing. This was a known thing, and they dealt with it. They rectified it. A lot of things, I think, took place for them to move on, but they did, and they have a beautiful family. They're happy, and then this has to kind of reemerge. So it's unfortunate that now it's in the public light, but that's what happened. And I think I don't necessarily think you could point at Ernie or Brian and say, you're the fall guy for all this. Like, it comes down to Claudio. It comes down to Greg. That's it. No one else.
Well, I will say that I don't think they're looking for a fall guy, Jimmy. I could be wrong, but I don't think they are. I think there will be consequences of, one, what took place, how it was handled, how it was structured. This is a scandal, right? It's like it's a lot of things are happening that it's going to come down to what was said, when was said, how it was shared, who shared it, who reported it, how it was reported. All these things are going to have a timeline of events that clarify, was there wrongdoing in the workplace? Was there misreporting? Could this have been avoided? Could this have been, changed? Did you where does the buck stop? And I think that's not necessarily a fall guy as much as there's going to have to be responsibility and accountability placed on this situation. Again, sharing individual information about frustrations of a child between people, friends, peers, whatever, not a problem. But I wasn't there for what was said. I couldn't tell you if Claudio or anybody that was having these conversations crossed the line in what they said, or there was an attack, or there was a threat, or there was any of these things, right? We weren't there for any of that conversation. I'm just saying there's a line there, and if that line was crossed, there's an obligation to share that information. We know a line was eventually crossed by Claudio's wife, but where those lines were crossed in those conversations is where it has to be kind of pushed up. And if that wasn't, then there needs to be some sort of accountability or responsibility taken for those sort of missteps in the process, just like anything, right? Jimmy doesn't track his man into the box. The guy scores. You can't just go well,
I blame whoever didn't keep pressure on the ball.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
what's my fault? There's no pressure on the ball. What do you want me to do?
If Charlie would just hold the ball up top, we wouldn't lose the ball and have to now play defense.
Yeah, it's all Charlie's fault. I'm going to blame Charlie.
Yeah, I went through that period, so I had to work on that hold up play.
So just to put this to bed for now, and if anything obviously gets revealed as it moves along, we'll obviously talk about it in future podcasts. There was a good comment from Michael who essentially said that they should be looking at all the relationships, including ones that are personal. And if they can get away, if U.S. Soccer, speaking as they can get away from maybe those issues because there's a long history between Brian and Claudio and Ernie and Greg, can we maybe get away from that a little bit? Then, and that those guys in those roles, maybe we wouldn't have had this situation, or maybe it would have been handled in a different way. And I get back, and I'll put this here, JT, just to get back to his original comment, as part of our review of the whole program, we're looking at how we're organized broadly. So we want to make sure that, and we're not just talking about the men's national team coaches, JT's words, it's how we're organized and what we're doing. And I think that in that lens, or through that lens and through that perspective from JT, it feels like the heads could roll just because they're trying to look at everything. And maybe these close relationships between parents and Brian McBride, the Reynas and the Berhalters, it's just too close. And there's just too much gray area, to your point, Heath Pearce. So very curious to see how this is going to play out moving forward. This is a scandal, and our first legitimate one, I would say, on the men's side in quite some time. Back in '98, I think would be our maybe our biggest between Harks and Wijnaldum. All right, let's talk a little bit about January camp. because we have 2 games coming up, Serbia and Colombia, but we still haven't named our roster for interim manager Anthony Hudson, who was an assistant to Greg throughout the World Cup. We do know, though, one name, apparently, Julian Gressel, is going to be called in. 29-year-old who German-American, got his citizenship back in November. Very good on the right side. So many, I think he had 13 assists a couple years ago for Atlanta United. Just very good, very experienced up and down. He plays for Vancouver. Now he was at Atlanta, then DC, and then now he's at Vancouver. I don't know why people continue to get rid of him and have him move on. I think he's a tremendous player. But we have a lot of cover in that area, Heath Pearce. Or
is he able to get his citizenship while living in Canada?
That's a good. I don't know. He's got it though.
Sorry, that's a distraction. That's a distraction of a comment. But yeah. Anyways, I mean, I say that jokingly because there's a lot of players that have come from abroad and they get traded from a Canadian team to a U.S. team, and they're like families are stuck in those places till they can sort out like the not green cards, but like just residency, visa issues and things like that. And that can be I know a lot of people that have come to the U.S. and try to get their green cards or citizenship, and they can't leave for certain windows during certain times and things like that. Including Stefan Fry. That was one that he had experienced as well. But I'm really excited. I'm really excited about just another. He's been a long time high performer in Major League Soccer, and so somebody that I think is probably past what I'm super excited about. But for a January camp to just see how he can compete at that level, sure, why not?
Charlie, I want to talk to you about what your expectations are for this camp. Obviously, from the coaching staff, they're interim. So it's really hard to know. It's going to be littered with domestic players based here in MLS, most likely, unless there's a player that maybe isn't playing a lot for their respective club team somewhere else, and maybe can get called in and get a little bit of that seasoning, let's say, in this rare opportunity to have a January camp. What are your expectations?
I think, by the way, I think he would have been the 6th right back at the World Cup if he had gotten it beforehand.
I'm surprised we didn't take him already, to be honest.
Probably
he was
8th,
available.
But
probably 8th, yeah.
Well, one, this is obviously just a call up for someone who's contributed to the league, has been, someone who I think if he was 23, 24, you could be really excited about the prospect, but he'll be 33 for the next World Cup. So it does nothing for me except, a congratulations that you got a call up, because, there are a number of players who get a call up for January camp, and that's their peak, right? That's it. So for him, he's been a tremendous professional. He's been in Major League Soccer for a long time, and he's done well. I think particularly he peaked with Atlanta United. But congrats to him for getting a call, because we all know what a feeling it is and an accomplishment. So I'm happy for him. But in terms of the national team, that does nothing for the national team moving forward. And then in terms of this camp, ultimately, you don't have a coach, because you don't know what the future looks like. And I'm still hopeful that we pull in a European manager who has had success in the past, whether, it's on the Champions League level, a top 5 European league level, or a national team level, but someone who's going to come in and demand respect, who can coach this group and get the most out of them, because I think that's what this group needs at the moment.
Game's in 9 days. It's in the first game's in 9 days. This to me is like where I'm starting to see. I'm starting to lose the value of this whole thing, right? Like,
yeah,
like
they're not even in camp. They're not even in camp, right?
They haven't even named the roster, dude. Like, what?
So yeah, like the whole point of January camp, for those who don't know, is you come in the first week of January. At
a couple weeks
at the end of the January, and you say, okay, a lot of these guys have somewhat been working out and have a form of fitness, but still a ways off, and definitely sharpness is gone, because you're not going to get a real sharpness unless you're playing games and you're playing competitive short matches. So you need at least 2 weeks of a camp like this, where we're doing, the beat test. We're doing these full-on matches. You have double sessions every day. It's hardcore. And then you get to the end and you play a match, because you finally built yourself up to play a match. To play, you're not even getting a full week yet.
Well, they're in preseason now.
Right. And now they're getting
there are some players who aren't even in preseason yet, who haven't even, or who are still on vacation. I know that for a fact. So even if they are in preseason, it's the early, you're doing some jogging, maybe some ball work, but you're not playing competitively yet. So I think this is going to be a camp that really doesn't hold much merit, to be honest.
Unfortunately, yeah, because I think there's some value in having these, but it feels like we're losing out on that value to both of your guys' points. There's a couple questions here. One's from Dell, who says, what kind of players are these teams bringing to play us? Well, when I look at the Serbia roster, I haven't seen the Colombian one, but the Serbian roster has 3 MLS players. Dejan Joveljic, who plays for the LA Galaxy.
George Petrovic,
who plays for the New England Revolution. When we have Ranko Vasiljanovic, who plays for Vancouver. And all those guys have plenty of experience. Petrovic has been very good filling in for Matt Turner. He was up for MLS Goalkeeper of the Year last year as a finalist. Joveljic wanted more minutes, produced at a pretty high level. I think he scored more goals off the bench than any other player, definitely last year, but I think it was a Galaxy record. It could even be an MLS record. He had 11 goals coming off the bench. He's going to be a handful for whoever comes in, and you want to have a little bit of time. And the rest of the players are domestic players from Serbia.
Gordo in the YouTube comments, Camp Crumb Cake.
That's a good way to look at this particular one because there's no lead up time. The coaching staff is still interim, and obviously we'll have more to talk about once everything drops, but just be prepared for a heavy domestic group of players. And I'm curious to see how Anthony Hudson, the coach, can get everybody together. Now, back in 2007, I don't know if you guys were in that January camp for 2007, but Bob Bradley was interim during that camp and through the Mexico game in February.
I had a game in that camp. I played against the U.S. team in that camp. I was in preseason with my team, Swedish team.
That's right. We played against Hammarby. I scored in that game. It was a 1-0. I scored. I did off a free kick.
Show us the goal, Jimmy. Show us the goal. Roll the clip.
No. Here's what happened. It was a free kick off to the side, and I headed it in, and Taylor Twellman tried to claim it as his because we were right next to each other.
No, the flag was up, though.
Yeah, no chance. We won 1-0. Get out of here.
I remember
playing Hammarby
after that.
I remember scoring, and I remember being so excited because I scored the winner, and I was, or maybe it wasn't 2007. Maybe that was 2005.
Oh yeah, maybe 2000. No, I think 1986.
Yeah, it was me. I think Paul Caligiuri whipped it in for me, and
because they had just released the Walkman, and I remember Jimmy was really excited about the Walkman coming out. And
I don't know. I walked myself into
down at Sam Goody looking at CDs, and
I went to the warehouse. Okay, I went to the warehouse. All right, so. Moving on from the January camp, obviously we'll have more info as it moves along, but let's talk about the FIFA Club World Cup because the Seattle Sounders are going to be facing either Al Ahly or Auckland City, and if they win that, they'll meet Real Madrid in the semi-final. So I don't expect any Sounders players to be called into this January camp. Heath, this is a pretty big deal. This is what we wanted, an MLS team in the Club World Cup, and now it's finally here. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I just want a good performances. Like for me, just don't get embarrassed. That's the Club World Cup for me. Is like go there and don't do anything that sets us back.
Sounds like the World Cup too, right?
Don't get
You think we're gonna get embarrassed by any of those teams?
I mean, Real Madrid.
They're good.
Real Madrid.
I mean,
not gonna get embarrassed.
No.
When did they start? When did the Sounders go in to start training for this? It kind of sucks for our calendar from an MLS perspective.
Well, this has always been the CONCACAF Champions League argument, right? Of coming into a season where it's like if you can get into that run and get into final part of the playoffs, because your first games coming out of the group stages, the way the CONCACAF Champions League worked was always that your first games after a shortened preseason were in a game of consequence. And so we've seen that have an effect on teams just naturally. You can't just you're not in mid-season form. But against Real Madrid, who knows? It just depends who. But I think that they can show well. I don't think the Sounders showed particularly well after their Champions League run last season, but they've got quality players, World Cup veterans now.
Hey, that's you broke that down nice. I like that. You're spot on. Spot on.
That's it. That's all Charlie's adding to the conversation.
No, I was impressed with Heath's breakdown there.
Okay,
I'm just giving him love.
Dozens of people are saying that right now in the comments. They're just really impressed by just wow.
Whatever Heath says. Who says he goes and works in the corporate environment for 90% of his day, but looks like he's just at the skateboarding park.
Well, yeah.
You and Tony Hawk.
He just got back from Big Bear.
I literally have a tie under this sweatshirt. You know.
Oh my God. All right, listen, we're going to take our first and only break of In Soccer We Trust. When we come back, We're going to talk about Americans abroad and, of course, this new transfer that Chelsea made that is going to impact our very own Christian Pulisic. Don't go anywhere.
Bring on the roars. Yes, come on. Right at it. It's in. Oh, yes. Major style points.
There is no place like it. You will never see anything else like this in the world of golf.
Welcome back to In Soccer We Trust. As a reminder, we have to let you know to not miss out on any of the Serie A action. Make sure you follow some of the biggest stars in the sport, like Olivier Giroud, he's super handsome, Rafael Leao, absolute stud, and Lautaro Martinez, who scored for Inter Milan this past weekend, as they try to lead their teams to the Scudetto, which is given to the champions, the trophy of the Italian league. How will the table change going forward? Which club has the best chance of winning it all? Which clubs have the most to lose? Find all the answers and stream every match from Italy's top soccer league live only on Paramount Plus. Try 1 month free with promo code Serie A. That's SERIEA, because they pronounce their A as A. And fantastic league. It's probably the most competitive, with Napoli absolutely smashing Juventus 5-1. They're clearly on top of the table and in control. Very similar to Arsenal, who took it to Tottenham this past weekend. And yeah, lots to talk about. Very curious to see how both of these clubs do in the stretch run. Napoli's known for falling apart. We'll see if they can keep it together. Arsenal, do they have the grit to make that happen? You probably should go over to the House of Champions to talk about that. But very curious, of course, when we're watching that. Let's talk Americans abroad, boys. And let's talk about Chelsea, who have the craziest ass transfer policy of all time under their new American ownership. But this, if another team is interested in you, they're going to go pay way over that, just like they did with Mikhail Mudryk from...
Welcome to the free market, Jimmy. Welcome to free
whatever,
market.
man. It's crazy. They give him an 8.5-year contract, which I think helps them get around financial fair play. Arsenal was in for a $70 million bid. Chelsea comes in and goes, I'm going to go for $100 million. And listen, Mudryk's a good player, but he's only has 6 Champions League games to his name, playing for Shakhtar Donetsk. We could argue that if all the Brazilians didn't leave Ukraine and Donetsk, that I don't even know if Mudryk would even be playing, which is another conversation there. But he's been doing well. I don't want to take anything away from him. 3 goals, 2 assists in his 6 games in the Champions League. He's got 6 goals and 5 assists in the Ukrainian league this year. I mean, he's a good player. I think they overpaid for him. Another conversation. But what does this mean for Pulisic? It's just one other player that, I mean, it's not isolated to him. What does it mean for Hakeem Ziyech? And what does it mean for Mason Mount? I mean, it's going to impact every Raheem Sterling and all the guys that they have in these particular positions. I don't think it actually helps them get better. They just kind of took a player away from Arsenal. Charlie, I'll come to you first. What are your thoughts on this and what it means for Christian?
I think they overpaid for Mudryk, and he's an incredible player, a young player, but not worth $100 million.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that the Shakhtar Donetsk president said, I'm going to give 25 million pounds of this transfer to the Ukrainian people, to the people
that's awesome,
resisting the Russian forces, which I think that played a role into the bargain, because they knew, hey, we're going to give X amount to our country, which is incredible. But I think for Christian, it's a sign when they're continuing to buy wingers. They're continuing to buy players that play his position. As we've said, Chelsea's not a club that's going to wait for you to develop. You get your chance, you get your opportunity, you succeed, great, and you're consistent, awesome. But they're always going to bring in players. They're always going to bring in top quality players for competition, and you just have to rise above it. But in Christian's case, he hasn't. He's shown glimpses. He has shown that he can, when he's at his best, he deserves to be on the pitch as a starter. But it hasn't been consistent, and injuries have played a big role in it. So now you have, yes, you have Mudryk, you have Nkunku coming in, and you just got João Felix. I mean, on top of Mason Mount, on top of some of these players.
I forgot about João Felix.
Raheem Sterling.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a number of wingers. Like I said, I think the writing's on the wall, and he needs a fresh start.
It is funny that João Felix was sent off in that first game. They said it's going to cost the club £2 million for his 3-game suspension to cover his wage and whatever fee for being sent off in his first game at Chelsea. But yeah, I agree with Charlie. It's just it's I think that's the natural evolution. I think it'd be selfish for us to think this has anything to do with Christian Pulisic, other than the fact that they're going to continue to sign. They have a new owner. They're going to spend money, right? I think you can have the best team in place right now, and they're going to still go out and try to bolster that and create competition in those positions. I just think it just furthers the conversation or furthers the argument that perhaps he should be going somewhere else. They don't want to move him for obvious reasons because they don't have to. They don't need to. Selfishly, Chelsea can keep Christian Pulisic forever.
I look at this. You're Manchester City. You buy Riyad Mahrez, and he's a perfect example. Riyad Mahrez was incredible at Leicester City, arguably player of the season. He has to go against some of these signings that they bring in constantly, and he's kind of on the fringes. You think, oh, he made a move just for money, and he's never going to play. But he continues as of late to play because he shows his quality. He keeps playing over all these players. Jack Grealish, 100 million pounds they bought him for, doesn't play as much because Riyad Mahrez is a staple. And that just shows you when you play at this level with clubs who are trying to win trophies consistently, the players are always going to continue to come in. And it comes down to that, whoever the player is, your grit, your dedication to staying healthy, your dedication to the quality on the pitch and showing it and coming up with results. And I think Christian has shown it, but not enough. And we just have to say, you know what, Christian, I think it's going to be better for you to go to a different club, maybe take one step back to take 2 steps forward. So it's all about just going into the right place, who's going to give him that support, where he's going to get the opportunity to play through the ups and downs.
Yeah, Christian, or no, let me say, Graham Potter actually came out and said they had no plans of selling Christian. And I'm like, dude, I don't even know how he manages all these people. I mean, he just keeps getting more and more signings. What do you even do if you're Graham Potter? They only have 1 win in their last 5. Got pretty fortunate. Well, I don't know, fortunate, but they beat Crystal Palace this weekend 1-0. They needed.
Well, I think come summer, by the way, Jimmy, then that conversation will change. But right now in the winter, like, what's the point of selling him? You're not going to get the value. Nobody's got the budget to buy him. You're bringing in players on loan. You need everything that you can get, because even if you can get 5 games out of him at high quality, you'll take it. Summertime comes, the window opens, teams have full budgets, players are out of contracts, their budgets open up again. And then that conversation can change where you can say, well, yeah, I always had plans for him, but now we find ourselves in a tough situation where we don't have room for him anymore. And we got to move him. You know, it's an easier story.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. And obviously we'll have our eyes tuned into that. Now let's move on to another player, Tyler Adams, who continues to perform well for Leeds. They lost 2-1 to Aston Villa this past weekend. Brendan Aronson still struggling a little bit. I don't know if you guys want to discuss that. We've already discussed it before. It's just going to take some time, I think, for him to kind of regain that confidence and get locked in. I think he might be trying too hard with regard to that. But as it pertains to Tyler Adams, he just got named as the U.S. Male Player of the Year in 2022. He earned 71% of the overall votes, followed by Christian Pulisic, who got second on 14%, and Matt Turner, who finished on 8%. Are you guys, Chuck, will come to you. You okay with that top 3? I think Adams was my choice, easy choice there. It looked like he was the easy choice for a lot of people. He played more minutes for the U.S. than anybody else in 2022.
Yes, and if you had to say 2 and 3 in your mind, who is 2 and 3 for you?
I don't know. I wasn't ready for that. I'd say Matt Turner definitely is in the top 3.
That's why I asked.
Yeah. He's still 3. He's still 3 down for me, but I'm.
Yeah, I was
gonna
say,
in my top. Yeah.
He's 3 down. He's not even in the start.
His stock is. Hey, listen, Charlie. You can be Amazon, and sometimes that stock's got to come down a little bit, you know, for it to go back up, you know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Tyler for me is very clear cut.
Is Matt Turner 2 or 3 for you? If you have,
I'd probably put Matt Turner 3.
Then you have Christian, Musah, McKennie.
I'm saying Anthony Robinson in there, maybe.
Not top 3 for me.
No.
I'd say Musah in there as I'd say Matt Turner's too. That's hard though.
I like Musah's probably in there.
Those are my 3 though.
Better than Pulisic or like above Pulisic.
And just like the fans that ran into Jimmy, I think they're all equal. You know, they're all tied at number 1.
Because you have to take the year's work into consideration.
Right.
So
calendar year.
I see people saying Reem. Yeah, Reem in the World Cup for sure would be top 3. But we're
talking all of 2022.
Yes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately he was not involved at all.
Well, you know, yeah.
But he's involved when it mattered.
He's involved when it mattered.
Deserves an honorable
and he got his team up to the Premier League.
Yeah.
And they're currently 6th or 7th right now?
And he's done well, yeah.
He's done well.
As long as
But
they lose
anyway.
to Newcastle, huh, Jimmy?
What's that?
As long as they lose to Newcastle, you're happy.
Well, yeah, I'm happy. Yes, I'm happy. Oil money's nice. I'm not gonna lie. All right, so let's move on to Weston McKennie. Let's go over to Italy. He was on the wrong side of a 5-1 scoreline in Juve's 5-1 loss to now. It was a big one, and I know he took some criticism for one of the goals where maybe he didn't track the runner into the box. Obviously, anytime we have our Americans, let's just bring it back a little bit. Anytime we have any of our Americans in anywhere they're playing in big games of this magnitude, it's only going to make them better down the line. They're going to learn from that, gain some experience, win or lose. And hopefully he's going to learn something from this, because they got their asses slapped.
Oh, he gonna learn today.
Oh, you're gonna learn today. Hey, I will say this though, guys. I don't believe Weston McKennie was subbed out in that game, was he? Everyone around him got that yank.
That stuck out to me.
Yeah.
So, okay. He's not to blame.
Yeah.
He's not the reason they suck.
Yeah.
Or Maxi Allegri just wanted him to really, really suffer, because anytime you're in those types of games. What's interesting is that they played a 3-5-2. McKennie was a little bit more centrally located, whereas before we'd seen him playing out wide. And then you got Chiesa a little bit higher. I think he did dip a little bit out wide, but we saw him kind of a little bit all over the place and had a little bit more room to float around. It just wasn't enough. They just weren't up for it on the day. And to what Patrick said, he didn't play well, but no one played well at Juve. So just get in line. Everyone was awful. Napoli were fantastic. So let's move on to the next player. I want to talk about Daryl Dike. He scores again for West Brom. As our resident number 9, Chuck, I want to get your thoughts, because when Daryl Dike is healthy and confident, he could be our best 9 in our pool. He could be. He's a different, I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think he'd be our best 9. It's similar to Brendan Vasquez. You say, you could say he's scoring goals, he's doing this, he's doing that. Is he our best 9? No, but I think they need to get to that level. In order to get to that level, they need call-ups and they need to have that experience. And I think a player like Daryl Dike, we saw his deficiency playing with the U.S. team was his first touch and playing in tight spaces and how quick the game is. You can get away with those things in the championship for the most part. Not internationally, and especially not against World Cup caliber, knockout caliber opponents. That's just not going to happen. So he needs to improve in the way that he keeps the ball, and he doesn't have to be the best dribbler. But what I do love about him, his upside, is his intelligent runs, the runs he makes in the box, near post, hard near post runs. He's now maturing in his finishing, different ways of finishing with his head, with his feet. He has a great shot, and I think he's switching up with his finishing, not just trying to drive the ball and power. Sometimes he's using placement. So he has a lot of potential. So I'm excited about his potential, and I've seen him grow from the college game, but nowhere near he's nowhere near ready to say, hey, here's the 9. Especially above players who have already shown a little bit more.
Sure.
Ricardo Pepi, Josh Sargent. Not that the DK couldn't get there, but he's going to need more time and more opportunities to get there.
One thing that I will say about his game, and I've liked it since the moment he came into the national team. I was actually critical of it in a lot of ways, but at the same time, the more you see him develop, the more I like what it is that he has is his selfishness. That man, when he gets the ball, he's got very few things on his mind. And generally, idea number 1 is I'm going to get into a position and try to score a goal. When he gets, when you saw his first caps with the national team, he was desperate to get in and around the goal, to just go straight down. Now, again, know that doesn't work.
You better be, because that's the only way you're going to get another call up as a striker.
My point being is that we have a lot of players that aren't as ruthless, that aren't as selfish. How many times do we play with strikers where you scream because they shoot every time they get the ball? They want the ball, they put their head up, they put their head down, and they shoot. And maybe it's the right time, maybe it's not. But you can't teach that.
Name names. If you just want to say Charlie, say Charlie Heath.
I was not that guy.
I'll tell you, Clint used to just, if he could get any part of his peripheral on the goal, he was going to let it rip, right? And there might be a better option out there, but you knew that there was a value in that selfishness, because the flip side of some strikers is that they're looking to lay it off, or they're looking to bring people in around them and around the goal. That selfishness that Daryl Dike has, I think, is a huge strength, especially when he's in form and as he continues to develop as a player.
And he is only 22. Now, to say about the terms of being selfish, I think that we had a system in place that was implemented by Greg Berhalter that looked more for combination play. And I wonder if that worked against Daryl Dike. I know he was hurt during most of his opportunities, let's say, to make an impact into the national team under Greg. But it felt like, and I think he can hold up the ball, but it just felt like there was a little bit more of something different. That said, Ricardo Pepi didn't get called into the World Cup.
All I got to say, JB Davies over here, 16, my brother, Justin. Yeah, his hold-up play is better than most R9s. But how many of our 9s have shown that they're capable of hold-up play at the best, the highest level? I mean, that's a given. Great. But we need our 9s to do much more than just hold up the ball. So, I mean, it's one of those things where you look at a player's positives and negatives and what's the balance, right? Because if you're super strong in an area, if it's by far above anyone else, then you say, okay, guy's got pace. He stretches back lines. But now how effective are his runs? How good is he as a finisher? Because when we were talking about Timothy Weah, who's now playing left back.
I was going to bring that up.
He's played right back. He's played right wing back. He's played right midfielder, right wing, striker. Now left back. The guy's played all over the place, and he's playing well. So,
right.
You're trying to weigh where you're going to get the most out of a player, and it seems like Timothy Weah can adjust and play in any system, in any role. So why not the 9?
Yeah, it's really, really crazy to hear or to see Timothy Weah playing left back for Lille. They won 5-1 against Troyes this past weekend. It has Eric Palmer-Brown, who didn't look good. The whole team didn't look good, kind of Juve-esque against Napoli. It just wasn't a good performance from everybody across the board. But Timo Weah did end up setting up, I think, the 3rd or 4th goal where he comes and cuts in from the left side on his right foot and hits a blistering shot. The goalkeeper can't handle it. They followed up and score. And so, yeah, I do think he was pretty impactful, and it's been fun to see him get minutes. It feels like the coach might not put him in his best spot, but clearly values him and getting him on the, we need Timo Weah on the field because he's going to make a difference for us. And so, yeah, that's kind of crazy to see him at left back. Now, another player that played out of position, Heath, I'll come to you on this one. We'll stay in the championship, was Josh Sargent under German-American manager David Wagner. And they beat Preston 4-0. They're currently in 7th, 1 or 2 points away or 1 spot away from the playoff picture for the championship. They won 4-0. He played pretty well, but he was deployed a little bit more out wide, which is a bit of a shame because we want to see him higher up the field and more centrally located. But at playing time's playing time, right?
Yeah, I think it's important, and of course, I think it's a great statement when a coach comes out and says, "Yeah, he's a 9," and I think that one is a signal of intent of where we're going. Now, you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and just decide we're gonna risk it all to fix some of these things immediately when we are kind of flirting with the ability of getting into a playoff spot. And I think that's priority number 1, right? That's for his job. That's for all those jobs. And they're not approaching everything with a sexy, beautiful style, right? They're grinding out results too. And so having somebody that you can put into a position and trust still, maybe it's not ideal, but like you said, playing time is playing time. And I think, again, those comments that Wagner made, I think is a sign or a signal of intent for the future for Josh Sargent. At least allows them to go out on the field knowing that, like, what am I doing this for? It's probably going to pay off in some way, shape, or form in the future.
All right, well, I'm going to give you, Chuck, I'll come to you, just kind of a list of what some of the Americans did this past weekend. You can dive into whoever you want, and then we're going to finish with some Yunus Musah transfer talk. Obviously, this is the transfer window here in January, but we had a Ricardo Pepi and his team Groningen losing to Feyenoord 3-0. Obviously, a big opportunity for him to cause some havoc, wreak some havoc, cause some damage. Yeah, I got that right. Against one of the top clubs in Holland. It didn't work out for him. We already mentioned Timo Weah. Gio Reyna played well and continues to play pretty well in Dortmund's friendly against Basel. The Bundesliga is starting up this upcoming weekend or very soon, and very curious to see how he's going to respond, especially with more eyes on him than probably ever before. Luca de la Torre played the second half in Celta Vigo's 2-2 draw with Villarreal. And then in Scotland, we had Cameron Carter-Vickers beat Kilmarnock in the Scottish Cup semi-finals 2-0. Ian Harkes scored for Dundee United. He's out of contract this season. There's some rumors he'll be coming back to MLS. This is John Harkes' son, and DC United being one of the destinations. Then Malik Tillman started for Rangers and got subbed off. Is there anybody that stands out for you? Somebody I missed, Charlie Davies.
I just think Luca Del Torre, and I also don't put too much stock into these friendlies, but Luca Del Torre looked like he was active and getting on the ball, and his teammates were trusting him. So hopefully 2023 is better for him in his club situation. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how Gio Reyna bounces back from this World Cup, because if I'm him, I am playing with a vengeance. I am going to be ruthless. I'm going to show everybody I'm going to move on from the situation and be better for it.
Now, I want to say very quickly about the Gio thing, because I had a friend say this to me, and I can't get it out of my head, Heath. Mm-hmm. And it's about Sebastian Kiel, who is the sporting director for Borussia Dortmund, and how when this news was dropping about an attitude around, or bad attitude around Gio Reyna, he immediately came out and said, absolutely not. That's not true.
Of course he'd say that.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Asset.
Right, it's an asset.
Even if he was horrible,
but
he's the worst person. He's going to say he's the nicest, kindest, sweetest person.
Because how much money do you lose if you're trying to move Gio? You probably lose what, 10, 15 million? If you're like, you know what, he is kind of a jerk. We don't really like. I mean, I know he would never say that. I think it's funny how quickly he came out and defended that. And once somebody told me that, I was like, oh, to your point, Chuck, I was like, yeah, why wouldn't he say that? And now it makes me question the timing of it and everything else. I don't know, but this Gio Reyna thing is really important for him to get out on the right foot, be positive, play with a smile, which is when we know he plays his best anyway. Any comments on Gio?
Yeah, I mean, what I will say also is that just because he's got what I think are attitude issues at times doesn't mean that he is a problem necessarily. And in your club environment, it's every single day is going to be different, right? You'd have to ask the players of what his attitude is like. And I will say that we've all been in situations where we've had to play in games and you don't want to play in them, right? Or you're having to train on a day you don't want to train. Like your mindset can be affected to where your body language is visible and you're trying to make a statement or show something, right? But either like consciously or subconsciously. And so I've seen that. I haven't seen that a ton with Dortmund at times. I've seen him flail his arms around and stuff, but we see every player do that at times. With the national team, though, I've seen his body language be different more often. And that could be a frustration of his own play, the style of play, his role. That could be a number of things that are very different than the Gio Reyna, who is a star for Borussia Dortmund, right? When he's healthy. And so then you add that to the injuries and all those types of things. So even then, maybe he's speaking truthfully about it, maybe he's not. But like you said, there's still going to be some protection of your player because he's young. But to go back to what you originally asked about Gio Reyna playing well in that friendly, I'm most excited because, again, Gio Reyna's attitude issues or what he was doing and was addressed. We moved on from it, and he's a huge part of the future of the national team. The rest of that wasn't his doing, right? The rest of that was his family's doing. The rest of that was our doing, to bringing that and discussing it all the time. I want to see him to be able to move on from that and prove himself in a lot of ways. So I'm just excited to see him doing well, and hopefully in a protected environment where they can nurture him and help him not just get back to the player that he was, but also kind of grow as a person alongside that to make him a better, more complete player in the future. Yeah,
Borussia Dortmund kicks off this weekend after the winter break on Sunday. They take on Augsburg. Very curious to see if Gio will get the start. Looks like he's been pretty sharp so far in their little middle of the season, preseason, as it were. The whole league starts. Pretty good game on Friday. RB Leipzig taking on Bayern Munich. So that's a very good game. Borussia Dortmund currently in 6th. They are 9 points behind Bayern at the top and only 5 behind Freiburg, who are in 2nd. So they lost 2 games going into the window to Wolfsburg and Mönchengladbach accordingly. So they need to get after it and get it going. Well, obviously very curious to see Joe Scally as well. I don't know if you guys saw that stat over the weekend where in the Bundesliga, he's only behind Jude Bellingham for the most minutes for a teenager in the Bundesliga. So very curious to see him continue that good form. And then I do want to make a correction in the Celta Vigo Villarreal game. It was 1-1, and actually Villarreal was up 1-0. Luca De La Torre came on at halftime, and he wasn't involved in the goal per se, but he helped make a difference at get the 1-1 result. I just wanted to correct that. So let's talk Yunus Musah. Let's finish the show on Yunus Musah.
Before Yunus Musah, you were talking about just being unhappy, Heath. It just brought up one of the most humbling moments you can have as a professional player is when you play a game and you're upset you're not starting in the first place. You play a game, you get subbed in, let's say for 10, 15 minutes, the game's over, and the fitness coach comes onto the pitch. It goes all the subs who hadn't played, and then your 15-minute butt get to the midfield line, and you're just doing sprints.
Doing strides, baby.
Yeah.
Strides all day long.
And while everyone else gets in, stretches or whatever, and then the next day, it's a cool down for all the players who play. And then it's a hard ass training for all the bench players, the reserves. And
some of the wildest tackles happen in those sessions.
Oh man,
everybody's
the starter and the starters just did their 30 minutes of jogging and stretching, and now they're stretching or they're sitting around and they're watching this training, and they're having these conversations, and you're just sitting there like that hurts. Those are the ones that really hurt.
Yeah, those hurt, and that's why it's interesting when you coach how you manage that, because you obviously want to foster competition, but there is a bit of a first team vibe. Hey, I'm a first teamer, and then everybody else.
I got one more for you guys.
Oh wait, before you, and then on top of that training, when the head coach goes inside with the
he stops watching.
That one is the killer, because you're like, no matter what I do, it's not
doesn't matter.
It does not matter.
My last year before I retired and joined Jim Conrad on Kick TV, I went to Gothenburg. I was playing unbelievably well. I was playing a center back, got food poisoning after our cup semifinal. End up in the cup final, Charlie, as you know, in Sweden, you play like the cup and then you start the league and you play the cup final in like May after. And I played really well. I get sick. I come back like just complete, like really sick. And the team comes back and they go on this 14-game unbeaten run till the winter break, right? Like top of the league by end up like 10 points, top of the league, clear, out and out favorite to win the league. And everyone's playing out of their mind. And I can't get a sniff at this point. And the cycle got so bad of having to do those sessions that I'm now getting sent to play in reserve games. And reserve games in Sweden are not like, I'm playing with like 16-year-olds,
Yeah.
And like playing.
And you're how old at this point? Like twice their age?
I'm at least twice some of their age. I'm in my 30s at this point. And like, I'm just trying to get back on the cycle to train with the team so I can like do well and whatever. And now I'm like playing going with the team on a Sunday match. The team is off on Monday. But Tuesday, I'm playing in the reserve game. So Wednesday, I have a recovery. Thursday, I'm back with the team. I'm like, yo, what am I doing? And that was literally opened my eyes. And I was like, yo, I can't, there's nothing I can do to improve the situation. Team's not losing. I'm not getting into that. I'm training, I'm playing in games that are so far off the schedule that like the double day I'm missing, or the intense training where like you can compete. I'm not getting any of that stuff. So I run into my teammates in the gym and I'm like, yo, I'm done. This is it for me. Like, I'm just at this point physically and mentally that I was just completely defeated. And I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Other than
you talked to the coach, and what did he say?
Yeah, he was just like, look, you got to wait your chance. And I was like, yo, I'm in my 30s. I didn't come to this. I came to this club specifically day I signed with the club. I've talked to Jurgen Klinsmann. I'm like, yeah, I'm going back to Europe. I want this to be a stepping stone to another club. And he's like, okay, I'll put you back on the radar of things and I'll be watching you and I'll try to help you with the move. So the whole idea was like, literally play a season and get on my way. And it all just came crashing down. Coach was like saying whatever he had to say, whenever he had to
just
say
to get you out of the room.
Yeah, just get me out of the room. I was getting yoked in the gym. I was like Mo Adu size, big, I'm
You're a
busting
tank.
out of my t-shirt.
That's too big.
Yeah, it was too big. Yeah, but what else was I gonna do?
You're like SpongeBob SquarePants, like top heavy with little tiny legs.
Exactly.
I love that. All right, let's finish on Yunus Musah. Fabrizio Romano, our very own, is reporting interest from Inter Milan, Arsenal, and of course Chelsea for Yunus Musah. Do you want him to stay, Chuck, at Valencia and continue to make sure he gets valuable minutes in a competitive and very good league, of course? Or do you feel like he should go try to take that step at a bigger club, knowing that he's going to have to compete for that position and might have to fall into that cycle that Heath is talking about and you had been talking about?
I think in the summer, if the right club comes and the situation is there, he makes the move. I think that would be best for him if he gets to go to a club. If Valencia aren't going to be in Europe, that he goes to a club that will be in Europe, and he's going to get get on a club where he's in a better, I guess, a better opportunity to challenge himself.
Okay.
Yeah,
No, I like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Heath. Go ahead.
No, my thoughts are the same. Like, eventually we have to not be afraid to throw these guys into really, really tough environments if they're as good as we think they are. Having said that, I also don't like when we have a good 6 months and now these players are on the move to this giant leap, right? We see that with Sergiño Dest. Like Sergiño Dest could have spent another 2 years at Ajax because he'd spent 1 season at Ajax before making the big jump. Now he still played a decent amount of games at Barcelona. But now his next move from Barcelona is to Milan, where he's going to get some decent minutes as a young player. But there was probably a giant gap between those where he could have been getting consistent minutes for 1 or 2 years. Value stays high, still part of like the hype train. And I'd love to see that with Yunus Musah. But again, it's going to be hard to say no if the offer's right and the team is right. But I would love to see him at least complete this season.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think a summer move would make a lot more sense. I want to see him, and I think this is kind of how I feel about all the Americans. I would just want them to go somewhere where they're wanted, that they're looked at as a part of the future and part of an important building block for whatever that particular coach or that club is trying to build, and not just another asset just because we want some more talent out there without a real plan of how he can grow within the club. And even if he has to fight for it, there's still a plan in place to make sure that he can take those steps if he starts to compete and outplay. When I look at Inter, okay, you got Brozovic, obviously very experienced Croatian international. You got Barella, who I really like, who's one of the top young players in Italy. It's just tough, right? And then Chelsea, obviously, that's always going to be competitive. Arsenal is interesting as well, but would he play? It's interesting. So it's a big conversation to have. Obviously, he's got to be thrilled to be linked to such clubs, but I'm with you guys. I think you got to wait until the summer and not do anything hasty here in January just because it might look nice and fun. All right, everybody, that is it. Soccer Week Trust for this week. So on behalf of producer Des, producer Alex, Charlie Chuck Wagon Davies, Hollywood Heath Pearce, I'm Jimmy Conrad, and we're excited for your support. As always, we'll be come back to you on Thursday. Unless something big happens, we'll have an emergency podcast. Always be on the lookout for that. Turn on your notifications.
Roster?
Or a roster. I don't know.
Give us anything.
We take anything at this point. We take a roster. We'll take whatever. But definitely excited to see how the Seattle Sounders do in the FIFA Club World Cup and get this roster, see what these friendlies look like, see if any players emerge as potential talents in a viable way for the full team. And it should be a great week as always. So we hope you have a great week, and thank you for your support. And we will see you on Thursday. Later.